Now, tomorrow, Monday the 4th, we remember the life of a very special saint, St Francis of Assisi. And last year in October, I shared with you the history, a little bit of the history of St Francis. And just to recap, he was born to a very wealthy merchant family. He was so fun-loving, everyone wanted to be with him. He had a brilliant mind and he was very generous. And the people just loved him. They were so drawn to him. But it wasn't enough for him. And at the age of 25, he gave away all his possessions and took to the road in just a very rough tunic. That's all. He had no food, no clothes, no money. Can you imagine what that meant to him, to leave such wealth and then to be so poor? Do you also remember the story of how on his travels he heard that a wolf was terrorizing the people of Gubbio? So Francis went to that place and he talked to the villagers, and he said that he would go into the woods to talk to the wolf. He hadn't gone far in the woods when the wolf confronted him with bared teeth, and Francis just quietly raised his hand and said, "Sit down, I want to talk to you." It transpired that the wolf was very hungry. So Francis made a pact with him that he would talk to the villagers and ask them to put out food for him each day if he would leave the children and their animals alone. Over a period of time, the villagers grew to love that wolf. And many years later, when they were doing some excavation work in the church, they found the bones of the wolf. That's how much they loved him. Now, last year, in the talk, I focused on relating the wolf to our emotions and how we can still the emotion and calm the wolf, just as Francis did. When I was revisiting the story last week, I pondered on how St Francis was able to communicate with the wolf. 3 points stood out for me. 1, Francis's mind and heart had to be still. It had to be without fear of the wolf. To communicate with the wolf, Francis had to listen with his whole being, because the wolf doesn't speak our language. He had to communicate on a different level. So he had to listen with his whole being. He couldn't do that if his mind was racing on this and that. He had to focus on the plight of the wolf. And lastly, Francis had to give the wolf complete love. Now we can learn from the example of St Francis. Now, in our lifetime, we're probably not going to be faced with a wolf, are we? Or anything like it. But the wolf can represent our fears, our anger, our insecurity, our desires, or anything else that challenges our true state of being. So let's look at the first point, the still mind, which to me is the most important. So why is it important to have a still mind? I turned to White Eagle's sayings, and he said that to commence our spiritual unfoldment, our spiritual nature and our faculties, the first essential lesson is to learn to be quiet, to be still within. He went on to liken it to a still lake, and we all know that a still lake reflects its surroundings perfectly. Just one little ripple of wind, and that image is distorted. And we liken the wind to our mind. The mind is the air element. So when we are still, we can truly tune in to the heaven world more easily. He said, our mind must be ruled. Now, we all know how hard it is to still our mind. So he's given us some tools. And the first one is breathing. What's the first thing we do when we're upset? We hold our breath. What do we do when we're anxious? We pant or shallow breathe. Most of us breathe too quickly and too shallow. So we need to practice to be more conscious of slowing down our breath and breathing deeper. Now this takes practice, but if we're mindful, we can do it. When we do this, it helps us to relax. And when we can relax, we actually slow down the vibrations of the outer or the lower self, and at the same time, miraculously, quicken the vibrations of our inner or our higher self. So that's the first tool. The second tool is letting go of the past. How much mental turmoil, how much emotional energy do we exert and waste dwelling on the past? The past is the past. A wise person learns the lessons from past experiences, lets go of the emotion, but retains the learning. So again, I turned to White Eagle, and he said, never regret the episodes in your life that you feel have been unjust. Never wonder if a certain course of action was unwise. you learned a lesson from it. This is the important point. You are on earth to learn, and you can only learn from your experiences. You need never doubt that eventually you will reap a golden harvest. So, oh no, when we don't have all that going over and over and over in our mind, like a mouse on a wheel, what are we going to do? Our mind might be still. So this is where meditation comes in. The third tool is meditation. And White Eagle said, practice making constant contact with the silence within. You cannot estimate its power until you know it, nor yet the comfort such contact with the silence can bring. Once safely within the silence, there can be no room for the intrusive mind. It falls outside the sacred circle. Therefore, to rule, bring always the divine will into operation, and by God's help, learn how to find that holy place within yourself. The fourth tool we have is working with the light. On our spiritual journey, we need to attune ourselves to and work with the spheres of light, to tune into the same wavelength or vibration of the angels and the wise ones. When we tune into the light, we are safe and well, as long as wisdom guides us. And this is why White Eagle set up the lodge as he did. This is why he encourages us to send out the light at 3, 6, 9 and 12 in waking hours, but particularly at 12 noon each day. Each time we do this, we're touching those spheres of light where the wise ones dwell. And then he encourages us to move forward into our spirituality by sitting on prayer groups, healing prayer groups for people, for animals, for the earth. It's all training us to work with the light. And then when we do that, he encourages us to come into the Star Brotherhood, which is another form of service and tuning into the light for a longer period of time. All this is designed to deepen our connection with the light. So there we have 4 tools to still our mind.